The tribe expelled 2 Apache women for being widowed. The rancher said, "Come with me." The sun was beginning to sink behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the Apache village. The air smelled faintly of smoke from the small fires that burned in the homes where families were preparing for the evening meal. Children laughed and ran between the tents, their bare feet kicking up dust, while elders sat in circles, speaking softly in their native tongue. But for 2 women, this evening was unlike any other. It was a night of sorrow, fear, and uncertainty. Their names were Nayeli and Ahayana. Nayeli was in her late 20s, with long dark hair that fell like a river down her back. Her eyes, usually bright with warmth, now carried the shadow of loss. Her husband, Tyan, had been killed in a recent skirmish on the edge of the tribe's territory. Ahayana, a few years older, had also lost her husband, a quiet man named Kiona, who had always been gentle with her. Both women had loved their husbands deeply, and now their hearts ached with emptiness. The village had been buzzing with tension for days. News had spread that the elders had made a difficult decision. According to old customs, widows were sometimes seen as unlucky, and in rare cases the tribe would insist that they leave. It was a harsh rule, and many within the village did not agree. But the elders held firm. Nayeli and Ahayana had been called to the council that morning, and their fates were decided. As the sun dipped lower, casting the village in a golden glow, Nayeli and Ahayana gathered their few belongings. Each had a small bundle of clothes, a blanket, and a few personal items that reminded them of their husbands. Their hands trembled as they packed, not knowing where they would go or how they would survive. The other villagers watched quietly, some with sympathy, others with relief, believing the tribe was following the path of tradition. Walking through the village, Nayeli's mind was a whirlwind of memories. She remembered Tyan's laughter when he had returned from a hunt, the gentle touch of his hand on hers, and the way he had always found a way to make her smile even on the hardest days. Ahayana, too, thought of Kiona, recalling how he would sit with her by the fire, singing softly in the evenings, and telling her stories of the stars. Now both women had to leave everything behind. The elders, seated in a circle near the center of the village, spoke quietly among themselves. Their expressions were stern but not unkind. One elder, a man with silver hair and deep wrinkles, stepped forward and addressed the women. His voice was calm but firm. "You must leave. It is the law of our people. You are no longer bound to our village. Travel east, follow the river, and find your path. May the spirits watch over you." Nayeli's heart sank. She had always believed that family and community would protect her, that she would always have a place in the village. The thought of leaving, of stepping into the unknown, was terrifying. Yet, as she looked at Ahayana, she saw the same fear mirrored in her friend's eyes. They were not alone in their sorrow. Holding on to each other, they took their first hesitant steps out of the village. The path ahead was dusty and uneven. The wind rustled through the tall grass, whispering secrets they could not understand. Birds flew overhead, their calls sharp and distant. For hours the women walked in silence, their feet sore, their backs aching from the weight of their bundles. The sun had disappeared completely now, leaving a pale moonlight to guide them. Nights were cold, and the darkness seemed endless. The women huddled together for warmth, sharing what little food they had, speaking softly to reassure each other. As the days passed, they encountered small streams where they could drink and rest. The wilderness was beautiful but unforgiving. Trees stretched high into the sky, their leaves whispering with the wind. Animals roamed freely, some curious, others dangerous. Nayeli and Ahayana learned to watch quietly, to move carefully, and to respect the land that seemed both kind and harsh. The world outside the village was vast, and it tested their courage at every turn. During one cold night, Nayeli sat by a small fire, her hands wrapped around a warm stone to keep from freezing. "Do you think anyone will help us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ayana shook her head. "We can only rely on ourselves," she said. "We have survived so far, haven't we?" "We will find a way." The women's bond grew stronger with every challenge they faced. Each day they reminded each other that they were more than widows. They were survivors. The memory of the village still haunted them. Sometimes they thought they heard the laughter of children or the faint song of elders around a distant fire. Each memory was a reminder of what they had lost and why they had been forced to leave. Yet the hardships of the journey also revealed their strength. They discovered that they could hunt small game, gather edible plants, and navigate using the stars at night. With every challenge, their confidence grew, and the fear that had once paralyzed them began to lessen. One morning, after several weeks of travel, the women reached the edge of a wide valley. The view was breathtaking. Rolling hills stretched as far as the eye could see, and a river sparkled in the sunlight like a ribbon of silver. It was a place of promise, but also uncertainty. Where would they go next? How would they find safety and shelter? They knew that staying in the open was dangerous, but for the first time since leaving the village, they felt a flicker of hope. As they rested by the riverbank, gathering water and examining the land, they spoke of dreams they had long abandoned. Nayeli wanted to find a place where she could live without fear, where she could honor Tayon's memory and still laugh again. Ahiana spoke of wanting to build a home, to plant crops, and to live a life filled with purpose and peace. Their conversations were filled with cautious optimism, a delicate balance of hope and reality. Little did they know, they were being watched. From a distance, a man on horseback observed the two women. He was a rancher who had traveled these lands for years, tending his cattle and learning the ways of the wilderness. He noticed their struggle, but also their determination. He saw something in their eyes that told him they were capable, brave, and in need of guidance. In his mind, he wondered if he could offer them a chance at a new life, far from the hardships they had endured. That evening, as the women made a fire to cook a small meal, the rancher approached slowly, keeping his distance to avoid startling them. The sound of hooves on the soft earth made Nayeli and Ayana tense. "Who's there?" Nayeli called out, clutching a small stick for protection. The rancher raised his hands in peace, his voice calm. "I mean no harm. I have food, water, and a safe place nearby. I can help you if you wish." The women exchanged glances. They had been betrayed by tradition, left to wander alone, and yet here was a stranger offering kindness. Their instincts urged caution, but something in his tone felt genuine. They decided to listen, if only to see what he had to say. "Come closer," Nayeli said softly, keeping the fire between them. The rancher dismounted and set down a small bundle of food. "You don't have to go any further today," he said. "Rest here and we can talk in the morning." As the night deepened, Nayeli and Ayana huddled near the fire, pondering the choice before them. For the first time since leaving the village, the weight of fear was balanced by the possibility of hope. They could continue wandering alone, facing endless challenges, or they could trust a stranger and step into an uncertain but promising new life. The decision was not easy, but it was the first sign that their journey might be leading somewhere meaningful, somewhere they could begin again. The stars shone brightly above them, and for the first time in many nights, Nayeli and Ayana allowed themselves a small, quiet smile. They had survived the expulsion, faced the wilderness, and met someone who could help them. Though their journey was far from over, they felt the faint stirrings of courage and hope, and as they drifted into a fitful sleep, they clung to the thought that perhaps, just perhaps, life still had something beautiful in store for them. The first light of dawn crept over the hills, turning the sky into soft shades of pink and gold. Naeli and Ayana awoke to the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of a hawk. The previous night had been difficult, filled with restless sleep and dreams of the village they had lost. Yet, as they stirred, a quiet determination filled their hearts. The land around them was vast, wild, and unknown, but it was also alive with possibilities. The rancher had stayed a short distance away through the night, careful to give them space but close enough to keep watch. When Naeli stepped out of the thin brush, she noticed him sitting on a rock, tending to a small fire. He offered a warm smile. "Good morning," he said. "You look tired. I have food ready. Come, eat before we talk." The women approached cautiously, still wary of strangers but desperate for nourishment. The rancher handed them a small bundle of bread, dried meat, and fresh water. As they ate, Naeli and Ayana could feel the warmth returning to their bodies, a comforting contrast to the cold nights they had endured. For the first time in weeks, they felt a sense of relief, even if just temporary. Once they had eaten, the rancher spoke. "I saw you two yesterday, struggling along the path. You need a safe place to rest, food to eat, and guidance if you are willing. My name is Elias. I have a ranch a few miles from here. You are welcome to come with me. No one will harm you there." The words hung in the air. Ayana looked at Naeli, her eyes filled with both hope and fear. "Can we trust him?" she asked quietly. Naeli shook her head slowly. "I don't know," she admitted. "But what choice do we have? The village has turned its back on us, and the wilderness is not forgiving. Perhaps this is our chance." They nodded to Elias, signaling that they would follow him. He smiled gently, sensing their apprehension, and led the way toward the ranch. The path was uneven and winding, filled with tall grass, rocks, and the occasional wildflower swaying in the morning breeze. The women walked close together, sharing whispered stories of their past lives to keep their spirits strong. As they walked, Naeli thought about her husband, Tayan. She remembered his bright laugh, his gentle hands, and the way he would lift her spirits when days were hard. Ahayana thought of Kiona in a similar way, remembering his quiet strength and the comfort of his presence. Each memory brought a pang of sorrow, but it also reminded them of the love they had once shared and of the strength that love had given them. By midday, they reached the edge of the ranch. The land stretched wide, dotted with grazing cattle, a few sturdy wooden buildings, and fields that had been carefully tended. The sight was both comforting and intimidating. The rancher's home stood tall with smoke curling from the chimney, promising warmth and safety. Elias gestured toward the main house. "This is your new home, at least for now. You will find food, water, and work here if you wish. You don't have to be afraid." Naeli and Ayana exchanged another glance, silently agreeing that this was a chance they could not ignore. As they stepped closer, a sense of wonder replaced some of their fear. For the first time since leaving their village, they felt the possibility of a future that was not filled with rejection and loneliness. Elias led them inside the main house, which was simple but clean and welcoming. Wooden beams crossed the ceiling, and sunlight poured in through large windows. The smell of baked bread and fresh herbs filled the air. For a moment, the women allowed themselves to breathe deeply, letting the tension of the past few weeks ease just a little.
"You can rest here," Elias said, showing them to a small room with 2 beds.
"Wash up, eat something, and regain your strength. Then we will talk about what comes next." As they settled in, Naeli and Ayana realized how exhausted they truly were. Their bodies ached from weeks of walking, sleeping on hard ground, and facing hunger. They washed their hands and faces with water drawn from a nearby basin and changed into slightly cleaner clothes. Even these small comforts felt like luxury compared to the hardships they had endured. Over the next few days, the women began adjusting to life on the ranch. Elias taught them simple routines: how to feed the animals, collect eggs, fetch water from the stream, and maintain the house. At first, every task felt unfamiliar, but they were quick learners, driven by necessity and determination. Slowly, they began to feel a sense of purpose that had been missing since they were forced to leave their village. Each evening, they gathered around the fire with Elias. They shared stories of their past, their husbands, and the village that had rejected them. Elias listened patiently, offering advice when needed and providing encouragement when they doubted themselves. He did not force them to speak, but he offered a gentle presence that made the women feel less alone. Despite the kindness of Elias, challenges remained. The land was beautiful but unpredictable. One morning, a sudden rainstorm drenched the fields, and the women had to work quickly to secure the animals and protect the crops. Their hands grew raw from the labor and their muscles ached, but they faced each task with determination. Each challenge became a lesson, teaching them resilience, patience, and teamwork. At night, the women often sat outside, staring at the stars. They spoke softly of their dreams, of what they hoped to achieve, and of the lives they wanted to build. Nayeli thought of starting a small garden, one filled with flowers and vegetables. I imagined raising animals and teaching others what she had learned about survival and caring for the land. These dreams, once distant and fragile, now felt possible. The bond between Nayeli and Ayana grew stronger each day. They relied on each other not just for work, but for emotional support. When one felt discouraged, the other would offer encouragement. When one experienced fear, the other provided comfort. Together, they discovered a courage they had never known, a strength that had been waiting for them to claim. Weeks turned into months. The ranch began to feel more like a home than the open wilderness ever could. The women learned the rhythm of the land, when to plant, when to harvest, when to care for the animals, and when to rest. Their hands grew skilled and steady, their minds sharp and observant. They began to realize that life, though hard, could be meaningful and even joyful when approached with care and determination. Elias became more than a helper. He became a mentor and a friend. He treated the women with respect, never imposing authority unnecessarily, always encouraging independence and confidence. He would occasionally share stories of his own past, of how he had built the ranch from nothing, and the lessons he had learned about trust, patience, and kindness. The women listened closely, absorbing the wisdom and letting it guide them in their new lives. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, Nayeli and Ayana worked together to mend a fence. Their hands were rough, their clothes dusty, but they laughed together as they struggled with the heavy wooden posts. For a moment, the pain of their past seemed distant, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and accomplishment. They realized that though they had lost much, they were gaining something new: strength, independence, and the possibility of a future filled with hope. By the time night fell, the ranch was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the animals and the distant hoot of an owl. Nayeli and Ahiana sat by the fire, tired but content. "Do you think we will ever be able to forget the village?" Nayeli asked softly. Ahiana shook her head. "No, but maybe we don't have to. Maybe we can take what we learned from the past and use it to make a better life here." Nayeli smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she had not felt in months. "You're right," she said. "We survived the worst. We can survive anything." The stars sparkled above them, a reminder of the vast world beyond their small ranch. They had faced rejection, loss, and uncertainty, yet they had also found kindness, safety, and purpose. The wilderness had tested them, but it had also taught them resilience, courage, and hope. As they drifted to sleep that night, they felt a quiet confidence that no matter what came next, they could face it together. In the days and weeks that followed, the women continued to grow in strength and skill. They discovered talents they had never known they possessed and developed a deep connection with the land and animals. Each day was a challenge, but also an opportunity, and with Elias's guidance and their own determination, they began to build a life that was no longer defined by loss, but by hope, courage, and the possibility of new beginnings. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and growing grass. Nayeli and Ayana had been waking earlier each day, learning to adjust to the rhythm of ranch life. The animals, the land, and the routines all demanded attention, and yet, amidst the work, there was a quiet sense of belonging that neither woman had felt since leaving their village. They were learning not just to survive, but to live in a way that honored their strength, courage, and resilience. Elias had become a steady presence in their lives. He guided them patiently, showing them how to care for the cattle, tend the crops, and maintain the homestead. His lessons were practical, but they were also lessons in trust and respect. He never rushed them or belittled their mistakes, and over time, the women began to feel a sense of pride in their abilities. Tasks that had seemed impossible a few months ago, lifting heavy sacks of grain, mending broken fences, or riding the horses, now became achievable. With each accomplishment, their confidence grew. One morning, while the women were gathering eggs from the chicken coop, Elias approached with a serious expression. "I have a task for you both today," he said. "It is not easy, but it is important. We need to repair the fence near the river. If it breaks, the cattle could wander into the woods. Are you ready?" Nayeli and Ayana nodded, understanding the importance of the work. They followed Elias to the riverbank, where a section of the fence had fallen during a recent storm. The wooden posts were heavy, the soil wet and slippery, and the river nearby added an element of danger. As they worked together to lift and secure the posts, they realized that this task was not just physical labor. It required coordination, problem-solving, and trust in each other. Elias stood nearby, offering guidance but allowing the women to make decisions and learn through experience. "Good," he said when Nayeli suggested repositioning a post to stabilize the section. "You see, sometimes thinking carefully is more important than just using strength." As the day went on, their hands grew calloused, their muscles ached, and sweat ran down their faces. Yet, despite the fatigue, there was a quiet joy in the accomplishment. By late afternoon, the fence stood firm, the cattle safely contained, and the women felt a deep sense of satisfaction. For the first time, they began to understand that life was not just about survival. It was about creating, protecting, and contributing. After the work was done, Elias suggested they sit by the river to rest. The water flowed gently, reflecting the sky in shades of blue and gold. The women dipped their hands in the cool water, letting it wash away some of the dirt and sweat from the long day. The sound of the river, combined with the rustling leaves and distant birdsong, brought a calmness that felt almost magical. As they rested, Elias spoke quietly. "You both have come a long way," he said. "When I first saw you, you were tired, hungry, and uncertain. Now look at you, strong, capable, and determined. The wilderness can be harsh, but it can also teach us who we truly are. You have learned that lesson well." Nayeli looked at him, feeling a mixture of gratitude and curiosity.
"Do you think we will ever be ready to live completely on our own?" she asked.
Elias smiled.
I think you already are. You have the skills, the courage, and the spirit. But living here together, supporting each other, can make life richer and safer. That is why I offered you a place on my ranch, not to control you, but to give you the chance to thrive. Ayana nodded thoughtfully. We have been through so much. Loss, fear, rejection. It is strange to feel hope again. But with you and with each other, it feels possible. The conversation settled into a comfortable silence as the sun began its descent. The women watched as the sky transformed into brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple. The beauty of the moment reminded them that life could hold unexpected gifts, even after pain and suffering. Over the following days, the women became more integrated into the ranch routines. Nayeli discovered a talent for caring for the horses, understanding their moods, and anticipating their needs. Ahayana found joy in planting and tending the garden, nurturing life from the soil and watching it grow. Both found fulfillment in the small, steady accomplishments that came from hard work and dedication. Despite the progress, the past sometimes returned unexpectedly. One evening, as they prepared dinner, Nayeli found herself thinking of Tayan and the village. A pang of grief washed over her, but she also realized how far she had come. She shared her feelings with Ayana, who responded with empathy and understanding. It is okay to remember, Ayana said, but remember that we are also building something new. We can honor the past without letting it control the present. These conversations became a regular part of their lives, allowing the women to process their grief while also focusing on the future. The ranch became a place of healing, where they could mourn without being trapped by sorrow, and where hope could grow alongside resilience. One afternoon, a group of neighboring ranchers came to visit Elias. They were curious about the two women who had joined his ranch. Nayeli and Ayana greeted them politely, feeling a mixture of nervousness and pride. The visitors were impressed by their skills and their composure, and one of them even commented on how capable they had become in such a short time. The praise, though simple, was meaningful. It reinforced the idea that they were no longer helpless or lost. They were valuable, strong, and capable of contributing meaningfully to the world around them. As weeks turned into months, the ranch became a place of stability and growth. Nayeli and Ayana found joy in the simple routines, in watching the animals thrive, in seeing crops flourish, and in the quiet satisfaction of a hard day's work. They also discovered the importance of community, even one built outside their original village. Elias treated them as equals, valued their opinions, and encouraged them to take initiative. The women learned that respect and trust could be earned and given, and that life could be fulfilling when built on these foundations. One evening, after a particularly long day of tending the fields, the women sat by the fire outside the house. The sky was clear, and the stars shone brightly above them. Nayeli broke the silence. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if we had stayed in the village?" she asked. Ahayana shook her head.
"I try not to," she said. "It would have been full of rules and fear."
"Here we have freedom, even if it is hard work. We have each other, and we are creating a life that we choose. That is worth more than anything we left behind." Nayeli nodded, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in months.
"You're right," she said. "We have been given a second chance, and we should make the most of it." The women spent the night talking quietly, sharing dreams and plans for the future.
They discussed expanding the garden, planting more crops, and learning new skills. They spoke of teaching others who might come to the ranch, and of creating a life that was meaningful, purposeful, and full of care. Each idea, no matter how small, felt like a seed of hope, ready to grow into something beautiful. As the night deepened, They lay down under the stars, feeling the cool grass beneath them and the gentle breeze on their faces. The hardships of the past seemed distant, replaced by a sense of possibility. They had survived loss, rejection, and fear, and they had found strength, courage, and hope. The next morning, the women awoke early to tend the animals and continue their work. Life on the ranch was not easy, but it was rich in lessons, challenges, and rewards. Each day brought new opportunities to grow, to learn, and to build a future. Nayeli and Diana realized that they had not just found safety, they had discovered a life filled with purpose, respect, and the chance to create something lasting. By the time the sun set again, casting a warm glow across the ranch, the women felt a quiet sense of pride. They had faced the wilderness, survived the loss of their village, and embraced a new way of life. Their journey was far from over, but they were no longer afraid. With each other, and with Elias's guidance, they had discovered resilience, courage, and the promise of a better future. And so, as the stars appeared once more in the clear night sky, Nayeli and Ayana felt hope stirring in their hearts. They had left the village behind, but they had gained something far greater, the knowledge that life could be rebuilt, that happiness could be found, and that even after great loss, a new chapter awaited those brave enough to step forward. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting golden light across the rolling fields. Nayeli and Ahiana were already awake, moving quietly to avoid disturbing Elias, who had been tending to the animals since before dawn. Their days had become structured, filled with work, learning, and quiet reflection. Though their lives were hard and full of responsibility, the women felt a sense of purpose that they had never experienced before. That day, Elias had planned something different. He wanted the women to take on more responsibility, to learn to make decisions on their own. Today, he said, I want you both to handle the morning chores without my help. Feed the animals, check the fences, and make sure everything is in order. I'll watch from a distance, but I won't intervene unless it's necessary. Nayeli and Ahiana glanced at each other, a mix of excitement and nervousness in their eyes. It was one thing to follow instructions. It was another to be responsible for the ranch on their own. They nodded, understanding the challenge, and set to work. The animals were the first concern. The cows were hungry and restless, and some had wandered close to a weak section of the fence. Nayeli approached cautiously, speaking softly to calm them while Ahiana gathered feed. They worked in silence, communicating with gestures and brief words, learning to anticipate each other's actions. By mid-morning, the animals were fed, the water troughs were filled, and the cows had returned to the main pen. A sense of pride filled both women. They had handled the animals with skill and care without any assistance. Next came the fences. Nayeli inspected each post, checking for damage, while Ayana collected tools to reinforce weak sections. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the work became physically demanding. Sweat dripped down their faces, and their hands grew raw from lifting and hammering. But neither woman complained. They had learned that strength was not just physical. It was patience, determination, and careful attention to detail. As they worked, they noticed signs of life around the ranch. Birds chirped in the trees, rabbits darted through the grass, and deer could be seen in the distance. The beauty of the natural world reminded them that even in hard work, there could be moments of peace and wonder. Nayeli paused for a moment to watch a hawk soar above the hills. It is amazing, she said softly. Even after everything we have been through, the world still has so much beauty to offer.
Ahiana smiled. Yes, she agreed.
And we are lucky to be here, to be part of it. Life is hard, but it is also full of gifts if we notice them. By afternoon, the chores were complete. Nayeli and Ayana were exhausted but satisfied. Elias approached, his face breaking into a proud smile. "You did very well," he said. "I only stepped in once to prevent the cows from escaping, but other than that, you handled everything perfectly. You are learning quickly, and I am impressed." The praise warmed the women's hearts. They had worked hard, and now they realized that their efforts were recognized and appreciated. For the first time in their lives, they felt that their abilities mattered, that their contributions were meaningful, and that they could make a difference. Elias then suggested they take a break and accompany him to the far side of the ranch. There, he wanted them to see a new project he had been planning, a small orchard near the river where fruit trees could grow and provide food for the ranch. Nayeli and Ayana were excited by the idea. The orchard represented growth, hope, and the promise of the future. It was more than just trees. It was an opportunity to create something lasting, something that would bear fruit long after they had planted it. Together they worked to prepare the soil, plant young saplings, and water them carefully. The task required patience, careful attention, and teamwork. Nayeli discovered that she had a natural talent for arranging the trees to make the best use of sunlight and space. Ahiana, with her gentle hands and steady touch, found joy in placing each sapling carefully and ensuring that the roots were secure. By the end of the day, the orchard began to take shape, a small but promising sign of growth and renewal. As the sun began to set, Elias suggested they rest near the river. The water reflected the colors of the sky, orange, pink, and purple, and the gentle sound of flowing water brought a sense of calm. The women sat together, tired but content, sharing stories of their childhoods, their husbands, and the village they had left behind. Though the memories were sometimes painful, they also reminded the women of the strength they had gained and the resilience they carried with them. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Nayeli spoke quietly. "Do you ever think about what might happen if we stay here forever?" she asked. Ahiana considered the question. "I do," she said, "but I don't feel fear anymore. I feel hope. We have a home, skills, and each other. We can face whatever comes next because we have already survived so much." The next few weeks were filled with challenges that tested their patience, intelligence, and courage. A sudden storm flooded part of the garden, forcing them to work together to save the young plants. A stray calf wandered off, and they had to track it across the hills until it was safely returned. Each obstacle was met with determination, learning, and problem-solving. The women grew more confident with each experience, realizing that challenges were opportunities to grow stronger. One day, Elias asked them to help with a neighboring ranch. He explained that the owners were elderly and needed assistance with their livestock. The journey would take a full day, and the work would be hard. Nayeli and Ayana hesitated at first, uncertain if they could handle the responsibility. But Elias encouraged them, reminding them that they had already accomplished so much. "Trust yourselves," he said. "You have the skills and the courage." "You are ready?" The women agreed and set out early the next morning, riding alongside Elias. The journey was long and tiring, but the landscape was breathtaking. Rolling hills, meandering streams, and distant mountains filled their vision. They shared stories along the way, laughing quietly when Elias recounted amusing tales from his youth. For a moment, the worries of the past seemed far away, replaced by the freedom and joy of travel and discovery. At the neighboring ranch, Nayeli and Ayana worked diligently. They fed the animals, repaired fences, and helped plant crops. The elderly owners watched in admiration as the women handled every task with skill, patience, and grace. By the time the work was complete, the ranch was in better shape than it had been in years. Nayeli and Ayana felt a deep sense of accomplishment. knowing that their efforts had made a real difference in the lives of others. The journey back to Elias's ranch was quiet. The women were tired but content, reflecting on the day's experiences. "I never imagined I could do all that," Nayeli said softly. "It feels amazing to know we are capable of so much." Ahiana nodded.
"Yes," she said.
"We have learned that even after loss and hardship, we can build a life that is meaningful and strong, and we can help others along the way too." Back at the ranch, life returned to its steady rhythm. The women continued to care for the animals, tend the fields, and nurture the orchard. Each day brought new lessons, challenges, and small victories. They discovered not only practical skills, but also the deeper lessons of patience, resilience, and the importance of community. One quiet evening, as they sat by the fire, Nayeli reflected on how far they had come. "Do you remember how lost we felt when we first left the village?" she asked. Ahiana nodded. "Yes," she said. "Duh. And now look at us. We have learned to survive, to create, and to hope. We are no longer the same women who walked alone through the wilderness. We are stronger, wiser, and ready for the future." Elias joined them, smiling warmly. "I am proud of you both," he said. "But you have faced fear, loss, and uncertainty, and you have turned it into courage, skill, and hope. Life is not always easy, but you have proven that with determination and support, anything is possible." As the stars filled the night sky, Nayeli and Ahiana felt a quiet joy. They had transformed from vulnerable widows into capable, confident women who had found purpose, safety, and meaning in their new lives. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a home, a place of growth, and a space where dreams could take root and flourish. And so, as the night deepened and the fire's warmth wrapped around them, the women knew that no matter what challenges the future might hold, they were ready. They had discovered the strength within themselves, the power of friendship, and the beauty of a life built on resilience, hope, and kindness. Their journey was far from over, but they faced it with courage, confidence, and the quiet knowledge that they could overcome anything together. The ranch had grown into a place of comfort, work, and quiet beauty. Months had passed since Nayeli and Ayana had first arrived, and in that time they had transformed not just in skill but in spirit. They had learned to ride horses with confidence, care for the animals, tend to crops, and even manage small projects on their own. Each day brought a new challenge, and each challenge was met with patience, determination, and courage. The orchard by the river had grown taller, its young trees beginning to bear fruit. Nayeli and Ahiana had spent hours watering, pruning, and protecting the delicate saplings. Now, as they watched the first small fruits appear, they felt a quiet pride. The orchard symbolized more than just work. It was a living reminder of how far they had come, how much they had endured, and how much they could achieve. Elias often walked with them through the orchard, giving advice and encouragement. "You have created something remarkable," he said one afternoon. "These trees will grow strong, provide food for many, and stand for years to come, just like you two." His words made the women smile, a warmth spreading through their hearts. Life on the ranch had become steady and meaningful, but the women still remembered the lives they had left behind. Some nights under the stars, Nayeli would speak of Tyan, her late husband, and Ayana would share memories of Kiona. These moments were bittersweet. The pain of loss was still present, but the women had learned to carry it differently. The sorrow was no longer a burden that weighed them down. It was a memory they could honor, while still moving forward. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Nayeli and Ayana were tending the livestock when a small group of travelers approached the ranch. They were curious about the two women who had become such a vital part of the place. The travelers had heard of their story, the widows who had been expelled from their village and had found a new life on the ranch. They wanted to see the women who had shown such courage and resilience. Nayeli and Ayana greeted the visitors with calm confidence. They guided them through the ranch, showing the animals, the orchard, and the fields. The travelers were impressed by the women's knowledge, skill, and grace. One of them, an older woman, said, "It is incredible to see what you have built here. You have taken hardship and turned it into something beautiful. Many would have given up, but you did not." The women felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. Their lives were no longer defined by loss or rejection. They were defined by their strength, determination, and the choices they had made. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, was a testament to their courage and their ability to create a meaningful life, even after experiencing deep sorrow. Over the following weeks, the women began to take on new responsibilities. Nayeli focused on the orchard, experimenting with planting techniques and learning how to care for the trees in different seasons. Ayana dedicated herself to expanding the garden and tending to the animals, teaching herself new methods to improve productivity and efficiency. Together they became leaders of the ranch in their own right, capable of making important decisions and handling unexpected challenges. One afternoon, as they worked side by side, Nayeli looked over the fields and spoke softly. "Do you ever think about the village?" she asked. Ayana paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "Sometimes," she said, "but I do not feel the fear or sadness I once did. I feel gratitude for what we have found here. We were cast out, but we have built something stronger than we could have imagined." Their words reflected the truth of their journey. The expulsion from their village had been a cruel act, but it had also been the catalyst for transformation. In leaving, they had discovered their resilience, their courage, and their ability to create a life filled with purpose. They were no longer defined by what had been taken from them. They were defined by what they had built and the lives they were shaping. Elias often joined them for long walks around the ranch in the evenings, sharing stories of the land, the seasons, and the people who had once lived there. He spoke of patience, hard work, and the importance of nurturing not just crops and animals, but also relationships and community. The women listened intently, absorbing the lessons and applying them to their own lives. They had learned that strength was not just physical, it was emotional, mental, and spiritual as well. One particularly bright morning, Nayeli and Ayana decided to explore a nearby hill that overlooked the ranch. From the top, they could see the wide expanse of the fields, the river glinting in the sunlight, and the surrounding forest stretching into the distance. Standing there, they felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had carved out a place of safety, purpose, and beauty from the wilderness. The view was a symbol of how far they had come, from fear and uncertainty to confidence and hope. As they descended the hill, they encountered a young girl from a nearby settlement. She had heard stories of the women who had been expelled from their village and had built a new life. The girl was curious and eager to learn. Nayeli and Ahiana welcomed her warmly, sharing their knowledge of the land, the animals, and the garden. They realized that their journey had not only transformed their own lives, but could also inspire and help others. Teaching the girl felt rewarding in a way they had never expected. The seasons changed, and with each one, the ranch grew more productive and beautiful. Spring brought new life to the orchard. Summer filled the fields with crops, and autumn painted the landscape with rich colors. The women worked tirelessly, but each day also brought satisfaction, laughter, and the quiet joy of accomplishment. They learned to find balance between labor and rest, between responsibility and reflection. One evening, after a long day of work, Elias called them to sit by the fire. "I am proud of you both," he said. "You have faced hardships that many could not survive, and you have not only survived, you have thrived. You have created a life filled with purpose, skill, and hope. That is something to cherish." Nayeli and Ayana smiled, feeling the truth of his words deep in their hearts. They reflected on their journey from the moment they had been expelled, to the long, lonely walks through the wilderness, to the first uncertain days on the ranch, and now to a life that was full of meaning and accomplishment. Each step had shaped them, taught them resilience, and allowed them to grow stronger than they had ever imagined. The women also realized that they had become part of a larger story. Their journey was no longer just about survival. It was about creating, nurturing, and inspiring. They had built a home, grown food, cared for animals, and helped others. Their lives were examples of courage, determination, and hope, and they knew that their story could encourage others who faced challenges of their own. In quiet moments, Nayeli and Ayana would sit together under the stars, reflecting on their journey. "It is strange to think how far we have come," Nayeli said. "We were alone, afraid, and uncertain. Now we are strong, capable, and hopeful. Life has given us a second chance, and we have made the most of it." Ayana nodded.
"Yes," she agreed. "We have learned that even when life seems unfair, there is always a way forward."
"We have the power to create something beautiful, even after great loss." The women also realized that their bond had grown stronger than ever. They had started as companions in grief, but they had become partners in life, sharing work, laughter, dreams, and hope. They understood that their strength was amplified by their friendship and mutual support. Together they were unstoppable, capable of facing any challenge with courage and determination. As the years passed, the ranch continued to flourish. The orchard bore abundant fruit, the fields provided sustenance, and the animals thrived under their care. Nayeli and Ayana had transformed the ranch into a home, a sanctuary, and a place of learning. They were respected not only by Elias but also by neighboring settlers, who admired their skill, courage, and perseverance. One bright morning, as they tended the orchard, Nayeli spoke softly. "Do you think our lives would have been this full if we had stayed in the village?" Ayana shook her head. "No," she said. "Perhaps we would have been safe, but we would not have discovered the strength, skill, and hope we have now. Life led us here, and it has given us a gift we could never have imagined." The women smiled at each other, feeling a quiet joy that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with the present. They had faced loss, rejection, and uncertainty, but they had also discovered resilience, friendship, purpose, and hope. They had created a life that was meaningful, beautiful, and full of possibility. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in brilliant hues, Nayeli and Ayana stood side by side, looking over the land they had nurtured and protected. They felt gratitude, pride, and quiet satisfaction. They had survived great hardship, but they had also thrived. They had been cast out, but they had built a new life filled with purpose, joy, and hope. And so the women continued their journey, not as widows defined by loss, but as strong, capable, and courageous women who had found safety, purpose, and happiness. They had discovered that even after great sorrow, life could hold beauty, growth, and new beginnings. And as the stars appeared one more time in the clear night sky, Nayeli and Ayana knew that the future was theirs to shape. With courage in their hearts, hope in their minds, and the bonds of friendship to guide them forward,